My granddaughter slid a note under my door at 2 a.m. 3 words that shattered my heart. I was still awake when I heard it. The softest sound, a whisper of paper against hardwood floor. I looked down from the edge of my bed and saw it, a small, folded note, the kind torn from a spiral notebook, lying just inside my door. I picked it up, unfolded it in my granddaughter's handwriting, 8 years old, careful and uneven. The letters she'd been practicing all year. 3 words. Read them once. I sat down on the edge of my bed. I read them again, and something inside me, something I thought age and experience had made steady, simply broke, because those 3 words told me everything I had been afraid to admit I already knew. Let me tell you about my granddaughter first, because she is the beginning and the end of this story, and you need to know who she is before you can understand what those 3 words meant. Her name is Gracie. She is 8 years old, small for her age, with her grandmother's eyes and a laugh that starts quietly and then takes over a whole room before she can stop it. She loves dinosaurs, not the cute cartoon kind. It's the real ones, and she can tell you the difference between a brachiosaurus and a diplodocus with the authority of a professor. She is, without qualification, the finest person I know. My name is Edward. I'm 68 years old, retired after 35 years as a civil engineer. And I have lived in this house, a 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street in a mid-sized town, for 22 years. My wife, Margaret, lived here with me for 17 of those years before she passed from heart failure 5 years ago. The house has felt different without her. Larger, quieter, in ways that square footage doesn't explain. Gracie and her mother, my daughter, Mala, moved in with me 14 months ago. My son, Patrick, is Gracie's father. He works in commercial shipping, long contracts, extended time away, sometimes 3 months or more without coming home. It's demanding work, and he chose it before Gracie was born, when the money seemed like the most important variable in building a life. When his latest contract extended unexpectedly and Vera's apartment lease ended at the same moment. I offered the house, 2 spare rooms, a yard Gracie could run in. An old man who had more time than he knew what to do with. It seemed like the obvious solution, and for the first few months, it was good. Gracie filled this house the way only children can, with noise and color and a complete disregard for the quiet that grief had settled into every room. She would come downstairs in the morning and find me in the kitchen and say, "Ed, did you know that the T-Rex had tiny arms, but its bite was stronger than any animal ever?" And I would say, "I did not know that." And she would look satisfied and climb onto her stool and eat her cereal. Those mornings saved me in ways I still don't have words for. Vera is 34. She is organized and capable, and, when she wants to be, very warm. She loves Gracie fiercely. I never doubted that, not for a single moment. And I want to be clear about it now. But there were things about Vera that I began to notice as the months passed. Small things, the kind of things you notice when you are 68 years old. And I've spent a lifetime learning to read the difference between what people say and what they mean. The first red flag came 6 weeks after they moved in. I overheard Vera on the phone, not intentionally. I was in the hallway and she was in the kitchen, and the house is not large. She was speaking to someone I gathered was a friend. He's fine. He's easy to manage. He just needs to feel included, and he stays out of everything. I stood very still. In that hallway, easy to manage. I am 68 years old. I've designed bridges. I've raised a son. I buried my wife. I am many things. Easy to manage is not one of them. But I said nothing that day. I went back to my study and I sat with it. And I watched Discovery 1, the visual clue dot, about 4 months into the arrangement. I walked past Vera's room. The door was partially open, as it usually is during the day, and caught a glimpse of something on her desk that stopped me mid-step. Papers, legal-sized, A letterhead I recognize, not from the firm's name, but from the format, the particular layout of a financial or estate document. I didn't stop. I didn't look longer than the second it took to register. But that night, I sat in my study and thought about what I'd seen. My house is in my name. Always has been. Margaret and I owned it jointly, and when she passed, it came to me cleanly, fully documented. It is the most significant asset I have, along with my pension and a modest investment portfolio that I manage conservatively. Patrick is my only child. He is, in the normal course of things, the natural beneficiary of my estate. But Patrick and Vera are married, and Vera was looking at documents that, from the letterhead format, appeared to be estate-related. I told myself it was nothing, that there were 100 explanations. I was an old man turning shadows into shapes. But I wrote the date in my notebook, the one I've kept for years, where I write observations and measurements and things I want to remember. I wrote, Vera, desk, documents, estate format, note, and watch. Discovery 2. 2 months later. I had a routine meeting with my financial advisor, a woman named Carol, who has managed my account for 11 years. Routine, except that at the end of the meeting, Carol looked at me with an expression I recognized as the one she wears when she has something to say that she hasn't been asked. Edward, she said, has anyone been asking you about restructuring your accounts recently? I looked at her. No, I said. Why? She chose her words carefully. Someone called our office 3 weeks ago, asked general questions about the process of adding a family member to an account as a co-holder. When the receptionist asked for a name to reference, they said they were calling on behalf of Edward Calloway. I was quiet for a moment. Did they leave a number? They said they'd call back. They didn't. Carol looked at me steadily. I didn't action anything because the call didn't come from you directly, and I have no authorization to discuss your accounts with anyone else. But I wanted to make sure you knew. Thank you, Carol, I said. I appreciate that more than you know. I drove home slowly that afternoon. The pieces were still separate. The document on the desk, a phone call to Carol's office, but they were beginning to arrange themselves into a shape I recognized, not with certainty, not yet, but close. Enough that I called my attorney that evening. His name is Bernard. He's handled my legal affairs for 14 years, drafted my will, managed the property transfer after Margaret passed. He knows my situation completely. I told him about the document, about Carol's call. I told him about the phone conversation I'd overheard months earlier. He listened. Then he said, Edward, when did you last review your will? I think, he said, we should have a conversation. Not urgently, but soon. I want to make sure everything is structured the way you want it. The full clarity about who has access to what and under what circumstances. Is there something specific you're thinking? I asked. A brief pause. Okay. I'm thinking that a 60-year-old man living with his daughter-in-law in a house he owns with assets that represent a meaningful estate should make sure his documents are current and unambiguous. That's all. We met the following Tuesday. By the end of that meeting, I understood several things I hadn't understood before about the legal vulnerabilities in my current estate structure, about what certain document changes could mean in certain circumstances, about the importance of being very deliberate about what I chose to do next. Discovery 3. The behavioral clue. Here is the discovery that hurt the most. Not the financial pieces. Not the legal exposure. This one, Gracie and I had a routine. Every evening after dinner, she would come to my study for what she called grandpa time. We would draw. She loves to draw, particularly dinosaurs, which she renders with a scientific accuracy that delights me. Or I would read to her. Or she would tell me things about her day with the comprehensive detail that only 8-year-olds bring to storytelling. It was the best part of my day. Every day, without exception. About 5 months into the arrangement, Vera began interrupting that routine. Not dramatically, just redirecting. Gracie, Come help me with something. Gracie, it's bath time already. Gracie, I need you upstairs. The times shifted earlier. The reasons multiplied. And Gracie, who is 8 and loves her mother and does what she's told, would look at me with an expression I can only describe as apologetic and go, I noticed this. I told myself Vera was simply managing bedtime more carefully. That routines shift, okay? That I was being sensitive. Then, one afternoon, I was passing Gracie's room and heard Vera's voice from inside. The door was nearly closed. I stopped, not to listen, but because Gracie's voice reached me first. But I want to tell Grandpa Ed about my day. And Vera's response, patient and firm. Grandpa Ed has his own things to do, sweetheart. You don't need to bother him every single evening, okay? Stood in that hallway. You don't need to bother him. I am not a man who cries easily. I learned long ago to keep that particular door closed in public, but standing in that hallway, hearing my granddaughter be gently, systematically redirected away from me, I went back to my study. I sat down, I picked up the phone, and I called Bernard again. Ready to move forward, I said. Whatever we need to do, I'm ready. Bernard and I spent 2 sessions restructuring my estate documents with a clarity and specificity that left no room for misinterpretation. We also had a frank conversation about the living arrangement and what protections I should have in place in writing regarding my own home. You're not being unkind, Bernard said when I expressed hesitation. You're being responsible. Those are different things. 3 weeks after those meetings, on a Wednesday night in October, I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of small footsteps in the hallway. I lay still. The footsteps stopped outside my door, and then the softest sound, paper against hardwood floor. I reached down and picked up the note, unfolded it. Gracie's handwriting. Careful, deliberate, the way she writes when something is important to her. 3 words. Are you okay? I sat with those 3 words for a long time. Are you okay? My 8-year-old granddaughter, who should have been asleep, but patted down a dark hallway in her socks at 2 a.m, had slid a note under my door to ask if I was okay. I got up, put on my robe, opened the door. She was standing there, small and serious in her dinosaur pajamas, holding her stuffed triceratops by one horn, looking up at me with Margaret's eyes. Gracie, I said softly, what are you doing up? I heard you walking around. She said, you walk around when you're sad. Grandma Margaret used to say so. I crouched down to her level. You remember that? She told me before she got sick. She said if Grandpa Ed is walking at night, give him a hug because he thinks too much. I held that little girl in the hallway for a long moment, and I made myself a promise. Not an angry promise, not a strategic one, a simple one, that I was not going to let the people who loved me be quietly managed away from me, not without saying something. Not anymore. I walked Gracie back to her room, tucked her in, okay, and sat on the edge of her bed until she fell asleep. Then I went back to my study, and I wrote down everything I intended to say in the morning. I was at the kitchen table when Vera came down at 7:30. She was surprised to see me there. I usually make coffee and retreat to my study. That was the routine she had come to rely on. Morning, Edward, she said. Cheerful, easy. Good morning, Vera, I said. Sit down, please. I'd like to talk. Something moved across her face, fast. Then the smile returned. Of course. Let me just get coffee. Please sit down first, I said. She sat. I did not raise my voice. I want to be clear about that. I have never found volume to be persuasive. I learned that from 35 years of managing engineering teams, where the loudest person in the room is rarely the one driving the solution. I spoke quietly, and I spoke completely. I know someone called Carol's office on my behalf without my knowledge. I know you've been looking at estate documents. I saw them on your desk in March, and I know that for the past several months, you've been systematically reducing the time Gracie spends with me. Vera was very still. That's a serious accusation. I'm not finished, I said. She was quiet. Night, my 8-year-old granddaughter woke up at 2 in the morning and slid a note under my door asking if I was okay, 'cause she has noticed the way children notice everything, that something in this house has changed, and she was worried about me. I placed the note on the table between us, those 3 words in Gracie's careful handwriting. Face up. Vera looked at it. Something shifted in her expression, past the defense, past the composure, into something more complicated. I'm not trying to hurt you, she said finally. I'm trying to protect Gracie from me, from instability, from getting too attached to a living situation that might not. She stopped. That might not last. I finished. There it was. Not malice. Exactly. Not the calculated villain of a simple story. Something more human and, in its own way, more troubling. She had been planning for a future in which I was either gone or diminished, and she had been quietly preparing Gracie for that future by loosening the bond between us, gradually, gently, with complete conviction that she was doing the right thing. Vera, I said, I am 68 years old, not 88. I am healthy and present and entirely capable of being a grandfather to that child for many years to come. And even if that were not true, even if my time was shorter than any of us would wish, the answer is not to reduce what Gracie and I have. The answer is to make sure she has as much of it as possible. I also need you to understand something about this house and this arrangement. I placed a copy of the document Bernard and I had prepared, a formal house rules agreement, clearly drafted, covering the living arrangement in terms of rights and responsibilities on both sides, on the table beside the note. This is not a threat. It is clarity. Says what this arrangement is, what each person's role is, and what the terms are. Bernard drafted it. I'd like you to have your own attorney review it before you sign. Vera looked at the document, then at me. You had an attorney draft this. I did. Because you don't trust me. I considered that. I think, I said, that we hadn't been honest with each other. And I think documents exist precisely for moments when honesty needs to be formalized. I'm not angry with you, Vera, but I am clear, and I needed you to be clear too. She was quiet for a long time. Then, in a voice that had lost all its management, Patrick doesn't know any of this. I know, I said. I'd like to call him together. Today, if you're willing. She looked at the table. Okay? She said. Just that. Just okay. We called Patrick that afternoon, all 3 of us at the kitchen table, the phone between us. It was a hard conversation. It's the kind that can only happen when everyone in it decides at the same moment that the truth is worth the discomfort. Patrick was quiet for a long time after I'd spoken. Then he said, Dad, I'm sorry. I've been away too long, and I left you carrying something you shouldn't have had to carry alone. You didn't know. I said, I should have, he said. I'm going to do better. I believed him, and that was enough for that day. Things didn't transform overnight. They rarely do. And I've lived long enough to be suspicious of transformations that happen too quickly. But they changed, steadily, in the ways that matter. Vera signed the house agreement after her attorney reviewed it, with 2 minor amendments that Bernard and I accepted without difficulty. It was a professional process, and at the end of it, everyone knew exactly where they stood. More importantly, the atmosphere in the house changed. When there is clarity, there's less to manage, less to perform, less energy spent on the careful maintenance of ambiguity. Vera and I were never close in the way she and Patrick are close, but we became honest, and honest is more durable than close, in my experience. Patrick came home 6 weeks later, earlier than his contract required, which he arranged at some personal, professional cost that he mentioned only once and didn't dwell on. He spent 2 weeks home. He took Gracie to the Natural History Museum, where she corrected the placard beside the Brachiosaurus exhibit, and the curator overheard her and spent 20 minutes talking to her about paleontology. Patrick called me that night just to tell me the story, laughing in the way he used to laugh before the contracts and the distance made him. Careful, Gracie's evening visits resumed. The first night, she came to my study with her drawing pad and sat across from me and said, "Grandpa Ed, I'm going to draw a Spinosaurus, but I need your help with the cell." "I know nothing about Spinosaurus cells," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm going to teach you." We spent an hour on that drawing. She was patient and precise and deeply serious about the accuracy of the dorsal fin measurements. When she went to bed, she stopped at the door of my study and looked back at me. "Grandpa Ed?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Glad you're okay." I looked at her for a moment. "Me too, Gracie," I said. "Me too." The note is on my bedside table. I keep it there, not as a reminder of a difficult time, but as a reminder of what it contains. "Are you okay?" 3 words, written by an 8-year-old at 2 in the morning because she noticed that her grandfather was walking the halls at night. Because someone had told her years ago that this was what he did when he was carrying something too heavy. Because she paid attention. I think about that a lot, about how much children see that we assume they don't, about how the smallest people in our lives are often paying the closest attention, about how an 8-year-old with a piece of notebook paper and a steady hand did more for me that night than any the careful adult strategies that surrounded that period of my life. Here is what I want to say to you. If you are a grandparent or a parent or anyone who has ever felt themselves being quietly moved to the periphery of a life they helped build, please hear this. You are not a burden. You are not easy to manage. You are not someone to be gently redirected into the background while others make decisions about your life and your home and your relationships. You have the right to pay attention. You have the right to ask questions. You have the right to call your attorney to formalize the things that need formalizing. To stand at a kitchen table and speak plainly about what you have seen. And you have the right to keep the door open, literally and otherwise, for the people who love you, especially the small ones, especially the ones who slide notes under it at 2 in the morning. My name is Edward. I am 68 years old. I have designed bridges and buried my wife and raised a son and sat in this house through 5 winters of quiet that felt like they might never end. And I am, because of a little girl in dinosaur pajamas who remembered what her grandmother said, completely okay. If this story reached you, if any part of it felt familiar, leave a comment below. You are not alone in this, and neither am I.